All right, cool. So the next matchup we're gonna go over is the Warriors versus the Kings. Definitely interesting. I honestly did not think the Kings would be able to go up 2-0 against the Warriors, but here we are. They're playing fantastic basketball.
Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts on the series so far, Brian?
Yeah. So a few things. So even during even during the Warriors kind of glory years, their one weakness, or actually one, their number one weakness from 2015 to now,
Yeah.
despite their offense being great, despite the defense being great, excluding this year, the defense this year was not great, but their Achilles heel for their entire run, especially in the playoffs at times, especially during their losses in the playoffs, it's just been turnovers. So they turned the ball over just way too much. And game two and game one, and especially in game two, they just kept on turning the ball over, right? And we discussed this a lot during the regular season, but the Kings play extremely fast, and especially they play even faster off of turnovers because Fox just gets that ball and he just
Yes.
bolts.
Yeah.
And everyone just runs into the corners. Sabonis runs the floor, and that's basically how the Kings got ahead, right? Um, so one, the Warriors turn the ball over too much. They're still pretty sloppy. I would assume that will get better at home. We'll see. Um, I know that the foul totals for both teams is pretty similar, but the difference between the fouls that the Warriors give and the Kings give is the Warriors, they foul so much at the beginning of the quarters. So they put the Kings into the bonus so quickly. Like without exaggeration, it's game two, it's the third quarter. The game started. By the 10-minute and 10-second mark, the Warriors had five fouls. The Kings were in the bonus the rest of the quarter. That's the difference between the Warriors and other teams, is that they foul so much at the beginning of the quarters that yes, the totals is not crazy, but because they fouled so much, they had to play not as hands-on defense, for lack of a better phrase, for the rest of that quarter. Right.
Less
So
physical defense. Yeah.
yeah. And lastly, they are just unable to keep Fox and Monk out of the paint. Um, I think a lot of people going into the series, and you pretty much called it right. Whereas Monk would be a threat, especially from three. I don't think the Warriors prepared for how much of a threat that Monk would be off the dribble and get into the
Yeah.
paint. Both those guards have been amazing at getting into the paint, and with Fox, he's kind of mastered that really like hard two dribble drive,
The
but
stop and go. Yeah.
stopping on dime at that 12 to 14 foot mark in the paint, and the momentum of his defender just kind of goes away, and he just stops and just makes a floater or makes a really short jumper, and he has kind of mastered that shot. And the Warriors have not been able to guard that. Even when GP2 has guarded Fox hasn't been able to kind of get space between GP2 to get off his little push shot or his little short jumpers, right? And then so and even if Fox and Monk does not, drive to shoot, because there are so many shooters around the perimeter on the Kings, they get decent looks, right? And the Warriors basically said, Damon Mitchell, like, beat us because he's not a like good shooter, but I believe he made three threes last game. Two threes, sorry. But he
Like,
two
yeah.
two threes. But basically, like, even though like he only made two threes, like the Warriors basically forced other people to like beat them, and other players on the Kings were able to like capitalize on the drives of Fox and Monk. So we'll see what happens in game three with with Draymond being suspended. I don't know if the Warriors will win. Having said that, like, I would anticipate that the Warriors will probably put up 120 points at home. Their defense would improve. But
Probably more minutes
if
coming
if
up.
they're having this much trouble against the Kings, who are just okay defensively if and when they play, whether it's the Lakers, who's a top 5 defense, if they play the Grizzlies, if the Grizzlies somehow make it out of that 2-7 matchup, who's also a top 5 defense. I don't know if the Warriors can make it far just because they're struggling against a team that's like middle of the pack defensively right now.
Yeah, I completely agree. And my take on the series is Warriors got to get it together. And I think one thing you might have forgot to mention is also for whatever reason this year, the Warriors are 11-30 on away games, which is a terrible record.
Yeah.
You just can't seem to win on the road for whatever reason, which I'm not sure how it plays into consideration statistically, like kind of more like superstitious in a way, but it's just like they couldn't never figure it out on the road for whatever reason this season. And just as you mentioned earlier, and it's just the Achilles heel is just sloppy play by the Warriors. They just kind of throw the ball away for no reason, which especially a team like the Kings capitalize big time on the fast break, right? Especially how fast they play.
Yeah. And the thing is, like the Warriors, they actually play okay on offense on the road. Like right now, they're averaging 48% field goals for between the 2 games so far. It's just their defenses.
Yeah, I was like, but what does that tell you defensively? They're still losing games, so something isn't working.
Yeah, they're like defense and the amount of turnovers that they give up. Like right now, the Kings are +8 in like turnovers right now. So it's just it's crazy. So I will say, and this has been bugging me like all year, is that for whatever reason, Klay Thompson, his stats look good, right? His averages look really good during the regular season and during the playoffs. This year, they look good, but he forces up not the best shots at times, especially from 3, because during Klay's kind of prime, he kind of had a really good balance of, running off screens, running without moving without the ball, and getting really good 3-point shots. But he also kind of has a balance of doing his post ups. Like he does 3 or 4 post ups in the mid range, like every game, and he was pretty efficient with that. But now he's just chucking a lot of just long range shots at times, and they go in at times. But there are possessions where he takes shots that Steph would take basically, but he doesn't make them, right. So that is one thing that is concerning. It didn't really get a lot of focus or notice in the regular season, just because people were kind of amazed that he's kind of nearly back to where he was prior. But his shot selection this year, especially in these first 2 games, has been very questionable in my personal opinion. Just from watching these first 2 games.
Okay, I mean that I never really noticed that, but I think you're definitely right in that regard. I mean, yeah, it's going to be a long series, especially without Green the next game. I mean, they're probably going to give more minutes to Looney, obviously, Kuminga, Michael Green, possibly. I know these guys haven't been getting too many minutes, so we'll see how they. I think the biggest thing for me is Sabonis is already playing well, and so if they don't have Green, like who's going to guard? Like, I mean, I guess there's Looney, but like I don't really think there's too many other players like on the Warriors that can really effectively guard Sabonis.
Yeah. Yeah.
Offensively, I mean, he's not the best defender, but I mean, Sabonis affects the offense significantly,
Yeah.
right? Because of like his passing, it's not just his scoring ability in his post ups, but also his passing ability. Like, how are you going to block? Like, because Draymond's defensive IQ or just basketball IQ in general is extremely high, and when you lose a player like that on the court, it's going to be tough for them to figure him out. So I predict Sabonis is going to have a big game against the Warriors next game. So I think in order for the Warriors to win game 3 and just at least game 3, since Draymond's out for a game, is like Steph or Klay or somebody has to score like 30 plus to 40 points for the Warriors to win. In addition to that, playing really solid defense on containing actually the other players, because I don't really think they have an answer to Fox. So I think Fox is still going to have a phenomenal series.
Agreed.
Also with Sabonis. So I think one thing that I wanted to point out is trying to stop the help they have. Like one player, as I mentioned earlier, as the Kings X factors, Malilk Monk, right? Like they can't figure out Monk. He's being way too effective, right? It's like they can't stop him. Like in game 1, I believe he had like 32 points. And as you mentioned earlier, right, with the drives, I think a lot of people think of Monk as just a shooter in a way, an athletic, like, swingman. He could realistically play mainly a two guard, but he's a pretty lanky guy, so he could probably play the three or whatever, any of the, I think he could, yeah,
Yeah.
2 to 3 or whatever the case may be. But figuring out how to contain Monk would be also a bigger thing that I think the Warriors should consider, because, like, with Sabonis and Fox, they're star players for a reason. They could pretty much handle most defensive schemes, but it's like but if you're able to stop their role players, you might have a chance of winning a game. It reminds me of similar to, maybe these guys aren't as good as LeBron, but that's how a lot of teams were able to stop LeBron in his early Cavs days, where it's like, okay, we're gonna let LeBron score, but like he'll have no help.
Yeah. So just to kind of close this out, like, to your Sabonis point that you made, earlier, in the fourth quarter of game 2, the Warriors were down by 12 or 13.
Mhm.
And Draymond guarded Sabonis full time, with Looney on the bench. And that's when Sabonis was missing a couple shots. He turned the ball over a couple times. Draymond was actually guarding him well.
Mhm.
And then the Warriors got it down to 5. And I believe it was 5. I could be wrong, but I believe it was 5 points, 5 or 7. It was an odd number. And the Warriors had all the momentum. And literally the play where Draymond stepped on Sabonis, he guarded Sabonis, and Sabonis, wasn't able to score. He lost the ball, right? And that's why, Sabonis kind of fell back, because Draymond played good defense. And that's when Sabonis grabbed Draymond's leg, right? So the Warriors had that momentum, and Draymond was guarding Sabonis really well in the fourth quarter. And that's what makes this whole suspension or this ordeal so, pivotal for the Warriors, that they could have won game 1. Just bad turnovers, and that's how they lost it. In game 2, despite the bad turnovers, despite all the fouls, they had that momentum going into the fourth quarter, in the middle of the fourth quarter, and who knows what would have happened, but they had a pathway to win game 2, but Draymond just did what he did. So, and to your point, I mean, I watched Monk. He mostly just shot from the outside for most of the regular season, this season and last season. I did not see him drawing so many fouls in this game or this series. It's been kind of a surreal thing to watch.
If you watch him in Kentucky, that's essentially what he did. So he's essentially being the player the Hornets thought he would be. That's just the reality of the situation.
Yeah. So props to Mike Brown for putting Monk in a position to really kind of expand or rediscover his offensive game, right? Because that's literally that's probably been, I mean, to like your point, that's been the biggest X factor in this series so far is Monk, which is what you pointed out, last week.